I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. I'm here today, of course, with my co-host, Teresa Kenny, but we are inviting a special guest to our show today, Kim VanDolah. So Kim and we've talked a couple times a year or two ago about her mission and about what her heart's call was in regards to women's health and hormones. So I knew that having her on our show would be a great and wonderful blessing to those of you who are listening, especially because she just released a book called Return to Simple, A Journey of Hope and Truth. So Kim, she is a wife and mother of 6. She's a lifestyle coach, and she really went on a journey the last few years just in really understanding how our design as men and women, how there's no accident in how we were made. So we're going to talk about ancestral living. We're going to talk about the genius of our body and how our body was meant to mostly eat and live. So Kim, welcome to our show today.
Yes, so honored and excited to be with you all.
So Kim, I'm going to say, when I was reading your book, one thing that has always sparked my little heart and interest is how the Amish live. I love it whenever I see, because there's like Amish country here in Iowa. Kim, you're in Iowa. And so we see little like horse and buggy situations, and we see like some Amish folk, in the stores. And I'm always so fascinated with how they live. And I'm always just so interested and curious on how they keep their skin so beautiful and clear. The women, they don't wear makeup. Like, they're so beautiful. And I can't help but just wonder, is it the way they live? They're living off the land. Is it the way they live? Is it their simplicity in living? And that's kind of where I'm going to start with our interview, Kim, with you, is what started that interest for you in regards to really digging into this ancestral way of living, the simple way of living? Was there a moment? Was there someone you met? Like, how did this whole thing begin for you?
Yeah. Such a story, I think, of becoming simple, which is, I've come to find, is kind of like one of my ultimate goals. And the example you're speaking of the Amish was so profound in my life. I, also admired the Amish and didn't really know any Amish though. So I'll kind of lead in with how I was introduced to the Amish. I'm on my 3rd year of coaching, and about halfway through there, I was trying to build an online business and feeling kind of this disconnect, drawn to my devices. And so I took a step back and just decided to pray and, where are you leading this? I know I was called into this. And anyways, the Lord brought in a homeschool mom who I had come to know, and she is a physical therapist for the Amish in the community north of me. And so anyways, I started receiving phone calls. So they were coming to me, which is so interesting. And yeah, so after that first phone call with this beautiful Amish woman, Ruth, the inspiration of the book came about. And so that is, kind of leading into the book a bit there. But I walked with these, Amish people over, 3 months or so. And so you really got to talk to them, get to know them. I was helping them by, changing their relationship with their food and incorporating fasting in their life. And they were teaching me so much more about simplicity in the way they dress, and just even their mannerisms and words. They're so kind. Their obedience was also very profound, as, you can see the way they live. And honestly, just getting to go then into their communities, into their homes, just sit in their spaces with the, wood burning stove, and just the simplicity of it all was like so warm to my heart. And I'm like, okay, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be right here. And again, it did impact the book as I was writing, because I was almost like living this out more. The impact it had on me raising my family is really profound too, because you see them, they have very big families a lot of times. And, their kids, they're not rushing their kids off to this, and this dance, this football, and their kids are amazing. I'm just really kind, a lot of times quiet, but when I've spoken to them, they have good conversation. And I was just like already realizing in my life, I kind of wanted to step away from that busyness that the culture was pushing me into. I'd realized that in a lot of ways. It was so affirming to me they're okay. We're going to be okay to be our unique family too.
So I imagine like right now, who knows? I mean, I grew up on Little House on the Prairie. So maybe someone else is thinking about Charles and Caroline right now. I happen to be thinking about, because I feel like that's more of a experience in a sense of maybe that feels somewhat close to the Amish people, and somewhat what I would have thought was simple living, but hard living. So like, like challenges where maybe in a sense you're trying to preserve an older time, or, kind of a way of life that is not so busy, like you said, and crazy. And we've got all this modern digital technology, and you're almost trying to preserve humanity in a different way. And that looks idealistic, right? But then I also think of Charles and Caroline's life, and I think sometimes, oh my gosh, I mean, when you watch those episodes, you're like, holy mackerel, I'm really grateful for modern life and the way that we have access to so many things. So I guess from your perspective, what is the balance? And I'm also curious about what you think from a person who lives in an Amish community is there ever this like, oh man, I wish though we could do this or we have this, but we're trying to like, again, preserve this old time of life. So where's the balance between accepting what is beautiful and great about where we are now in modern world, but also trying to like capture something that was beautiful from old time, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a profoundly beautiful question. And I think that's what we can fall into. We can get into those extremes of wanting to just go all in. But what I've learned is that we can take all these ancestral principles from their culture, other cultures, and what they're doing right, and we can incorporate them into our modern life. Like, we were speaking into that, like slowing things down. We don't have to go at as fast a pace as we're being led into. We can eat a simpler diet. We can, in all these ways, we can shift our lives. I had an experience in the book of our septic system in the middle of winter going out, and it was a whole thing. We were like hauling buckets of water from our sink from doing the dishes outside. And I was like, all right, we're living the ancestral way here and just embracing the whole experience, like spending more time with my kids as we're like hand washing dishes. And at some point after months of that, it was like, okay, I'm ready for my dishwasher back. And the Amish are similar. They are trying to preserve this beautiful way of life, which is so important for us. That example, I think, is so critical in our times now and the times to come. But they do have, these pulls of wanting to have some things be a little bit easier. But I think, that's where their community as a whole comes in, and that obedience piece comes in, which is honestly for me pretty profound to, like they have pins that are holding their dress together and they poke them. And it's like, wow, that's really obedient.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You know what this makes me think of when you share community, because they live in community. Again, I'm sure that if, personally, let's say I'm in an Amish community and I just had a baby and I'm breastfeeding and my sister is out and she's in the garden and she's too busy to nurse, or her 18-month-old, come on over. Like, I can just imagine, like, we're all helping each other. Maybe that happens. I don't know. But in similar ways, we're all kind of watching each other's kids. We're living in community. And it makes me think of that documentary show that came on. We've mentioned it a few times on our podcast about the blue zones and about how there's different reasons people are healthy based on where they live. There's not like just one thing that makes everyone healthy, but they did notice that the one thing that doesn't have anything to do with food that made them healthy, well, the two things were community and spiritual health, like some sort of sense of a higher being. So I always think that's so interesting whenever we get so hyper about like wellness and health and all this, which is good. Really, we are looking too close to the ground. If we zoom up and we think, okay, it's actually like who we're living life with that has a huge impact on our overall health, well-being, quality of life. And, is there purpose? Do we notice that purpose? I like that Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That book is awesome. I always think about that. And we can get into that. But what I really want you to talk about, Kim, because I'm sure everyone listening is really wondering, even though I just made a big deal about community and a purpose, a higher sense of purpose and a meaning in life, I really, really, though, want to talk about eating, like ancestral eating. So how does ancestral eating and simple eating, what does that look like? When you're saying simple eating, what is simple eating and how do you eat simply?
Yeah. So could be different for each of us. And as you said, as people have studied these ancestral populations, it doesn't always look the same, but there is kind of this grounding commonality, and that is animal-based foods. And so when I talk about simple foods, I'm talking about saturated fat and animal protein. And yeah, what I came to realize was like, those are actually the most nutrient dense foods. Those are what fuel. If you look at Weston A. Price's work, it's incredible work. And that is exactly what he found, this common ground. Yeah, so that's simple food. And it just shocked me. About 4 years ago, I came across this from the influencer, Dr. Mindy Pelz, who I'm sure you're familiar with. Okay. I had followed her for years, fasting, learning so much about my own like hormonal health and fasting around my cycle. It was wonderful. And then she actually introduced the carnivore diet in a 5-day challenge. And that is what sparked really quite an adventure for me and why I'm in the space I'm in right now. Amazing that 5 days could do that, right? But it happens. So anyways, realizing in those 5 days, the energy just shot up for me. My brain clarity. I'm a mom of 6. Like those things are so profound. I don't have any chronic health issues to overcome, but that in itself was enough to be like something's here. And why with the absolute opposite advice, it feels like that I was getting like, don't eat too much fat, don't eat protein, eat like tiny amounts of protein. I just began to like just dig in, like, what is this about and why am I feeling the way? And then it led me to Weston A. Price. It led me to just the truth of our biology, that we're not so much fermenters. Our, guts are designed for this protein and fat. So simple foods is a beautiful thing. And I thought I had to have this balanced meal on the table. And now I understand what the most nutrient dense foods I can feed my family are. And I prioritize those now. And so, yeah, in the book, I really speak into this. And I call it a self-science approach. I really encourage, it's an elimination, basically. And just coming to find out maybe 30, 60, 90 days of this. And if you feel great, keep going, right? But if you want to bring some plants back in, yeah, do it experimentally and see which plants are affecting. We have so many autoimmune issues going on that are being impacted by plants, and people don't realize that. It's quite profound. The millions of stories really now, I think it is, online of people giving their witness of this. I mean, I don't think it can be ignored. So I just encourage anybody, when you think about hormones too, plants have hormone disruptors. I mean, that can be affecting our journey too. So that piece for you guys and your audience could possibly help them on their journey too.
I have an example of somebody who, I have probably lots of examples, but this one is recent and profound. And actually I was thinking, gosh, I really should do an interview about this, but she had a condition called, it's extremely rare, progesterone autoimmune dermatitis. So with her menstrual cycle, basically every time she would hit her post-ovulation phase, she'd break out in a severe dermatitis, a rash. And then by the time she would start her period, on the period, it would clear up. I mean, it's so weirdly cyclic and so like really bad, the rash. I can't even explain it to you, but, and she's not the first patient I've had with this. I've probably had 3 or 4 in my practice over 25 years. So, but it's so rare. Anyway, so she came to see me, and she had already made a lot of progress, things, that she had done. And she was very holistic and she was, doing modern medicine, but also adding a lot of things that were holistic. And all I kind of did was add a couple things. But one of the things was, let's just go strictly carnivore. And that was a really helpful piece to really, it was the first cycle in it that she was able to fully not break out in a rash. So, and the principle around that is just, I don't know, I just think of leaky gut, right? And you just like need the gut to be able to repair. And these autoimmune conditions, of course, we know are linked to leaky gut. And you have to give the gut time on its own, in a sense. Like our bodies are very intuitive and can heal. But when it's dealing with, like you said, all of these different plants with different things and all these, it's like too much. It's the simplicity of the carnivore diet and the body's ability to heal by only having to see a couple things, for a while. You're like, thank goodness, my body, that's what I hear it saying. Thank goodness, just give me some time, people. I will heal if you just give me some time. And then I can work on whatever this problem you have is. But we keep putting all this stuff in, the body's like, too much. So I see that as like truly like simplicity. Carnivore diet is simplicity, and that's what allows for healing. And I can sense that in a lot of ways we could extend that to all the different things that you're talking about in terms of your book. Like simplicity allows healing because it allows the body time, because you're giving it time finally for the first, so maybe you could expand a little bit on that and how other areas besides nutrition, that if you give the body like a simple way of living, it allows for that natural healing process to occur.
Absolutely. Oh, that's exactly what happened to me and so many carnivores, honestly. I was just speaking to a group about this just recently. And it's like, okay, you discover this amazing, simple way of eating that brings an amazing amount of healing. Honestly, I just wondered, like, what else is there, Lord, out there? Like, what else is there that you have? And he just brought like, okay, what about getting outside more in the sun? I mean, I already understood these, but I started really leaning into them, these ancestral principles. We live most of our lives inside. Our kids live most of their lives inside. So, getting outside, the Amish example of that too was profound. I love to ground. I love to get my bare feet on the ground. This time of year is a little difficult for that. But even more so than all those practical things we can go out and do would be to look at our mind and heart and simplify those. When we can look at our schedules and create the time and space to do the things that truly matter. We're so busy, like going from one thing to other. We're overly stressed. Stress is a killer. Stress is going to affect our health. So yeah, just that taking a step back and discerning what's most important to you in your life and do more of that. I'm a big proponent of play too. Just invoking more creativity and play in our lives.
So I'll take a pause for a moment to just mention our podcast sponsor, We Heart Nutrition. We Heart Nutrition, I just opened my box. I really want to, I wish I could show you the box right now, but I handed off some of the things that were in there that I just got from We Heart Nutrition. I was so excited when I opened it because what was at the top was it was a men's healthy multivitamin. It was a men's multivitamin. I was like, what? This is great. I have 6 sons and they were all home for Thanksgiving break recently. And I was able to pass out samples of this multivitamin to them and send them back off to college. And it just, as a mom, I just was like, how college diets are, right? And we know that they don't always get the proper nutrition. And I thought, perfect timing it's the winter. We know colds and flus and all sorts of things are going around. And here I have this great supplement, quality, backed by research, third party tested from We Heart Nutrition to give to my son. So if you're interested in really high quality supplements that really come from a heart of the family, really, truly, we really believe in We Heart Nutrition, and you can get 20% off with the code GENIUS at weheartnutrition.com. The code GENIUS will get you 20% out. So we really encourage you to check that out. And Jamie, I'm going to let you ask the next question.
Well, actually, before I ask the next question, I'm going to give a shout out to our podcast sponsor for these next few months, Tiny Health. Tiny Health is an incredible gut testing program. If any of you guys struggle even with absorbing nutrients, I know that's going to be a question I ask Kim next, but we might be taking in these nutrient dense foods, but if our gut is not in balance, or if there's gut dysbiosis, if there's an unequal balance between the good and the bad bacteria, we're not able to absorb the nutrients and the vitamins that we're eating. So if you feel like, you're doing everything right, you're managing your stress, you're taking your supplements, you're eating well, but you still feel off, this isn't you just imagining it. It might be your gut microbiome. So this episode is brought to you by Tiny Health, the first and only microbiome test designed for all ages and stages of life, even newborns. So what makes Tiny Health different is that they use whole genome sequencing, the same technology used in cutting-edge research labs to show you exactly what microbes are in your gut and your vaginal microbiome, and more importantly, what they're doing there. Your microbiome results go beyond the data. There's a dashboard full of all of your results and action plans for you when you get your test and your result. And I know this because we did this for my son who struggles with hyperactivity. So we did find that there's some gut issues there that we're working on. If you're interested in learning more or getting a test yourself, visit tinyhealth.com and use code Hormone Genius, all one word, Hormone Genius, to get $50 off your test. So again, that's tinyhealth.com, Hormone Genius, to get $50 off your test. Okay, with that, Kim, this is a perfect leeway because one of the things I pulled from your book that I thought was so interesting, and I've said this several times, pretty sure this is from your book. If it's not, it spurred the thought, is that when people think about sensitivities, food allergies, I've never heard of anyone saying, I'm allergic to meat ever in my life. Never. Like, I'm allergic to gluten, dairy, eggs, I'm allergic, or I have sensitivities to avocado or broccoli or whatever. I've never heard that of meat in my life. But what I have heard of people not being able to break down protein because of maybe a stomach acid issue. So how do you manage advice, or how do you manage lifestyle care to these people who may be eating a carnivore diet, but maybe they're not seeing the benefit, and it's because of their stomach acid, gut health? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so this definitely comes up. I think what I lean into, I guess, first would be the healing bone broths, to lean into that along with eating, like a soup or something with some meat. But yeah, I think a lot of carnivores have come to see too, if it's not, digestion isn't still going well, usually it does resolve gut issues, honestly, just by itself, carnivore does. But for some, it doesn't, and they may need some enzymes to help with the breakdown. We have so many, gallbladder issues. So some, I'm not a supplement expert, that'd be something like I'd send somebody to Teresa for, and she'd, help with that kind of thing. But yeah, ferments too can be something beneficial, eating, the meat with a ferment, like, sauerkraut, or maybe even a dairy ferment, like kefir or yogurts. That is what I've found seems to, help people in that area. Like I've said, in my experience, I've helped a ton of people. So to be able to, what I've seen is like, yeah, it's pretty much carnivore takes care of it.
So what about health? Like, I guess not health, illness. What about illness? And how, I guess, personally, do you approach that? How do you approach illness? Is it different? Do you not go to the urgent care down the street? Do you just not get sick because you've found a magic, way to avoid all those things? what is your philosophy around how to approach illness? And is it different than what most people would say in the standard kind of, again, culture that we have that they take part in?
Yeah, and I'll just address that just personally as for myself and my family. Yeah, about I haven't been to my family doctor in like 6 years. So that's kind of gives you an example of how I approach health. I am just really blessed to have really natural minded women come into my life who understand herbs, homeopathy. And these are the sorts of things that I've been able to myself and within my family keep us healthy. If we do have, a respiratory, we just had a respiratory thing come through our home. And yeah, we didn't have to go to urgent care, even though there were some fevers. I think maybe over time too, as a mom, more of a veteran mom, like now, like you just, some of those fears that used to be there when your kids were little and with your first few, they just, yeah, I've overcome that. Like I said, some really profound women have come into my life and they're examples. Again, this is a more ancestral way of looking at health and going to the doctor. You just weren't going to the doctor regularly. You went for emergencies, and that doesn't happen that often. And I do find that we stay healthier. We just don't get sick as often. That's such a blessing. This respiratory thing that's come through our home, I haven't gotten. I've felt the verge of it a couple times, but I prioritize more rest and, just these principles that are simple.
What's interesting is my son. So, okay, I have 4 children, and 2 of my children are very hyperactive. And they come by it honestly because I am also hyperactive. I remember when I was little, I would just like jitter. I'd be jittery, but not because I was anxious so much as I was happy. But I think it came in the way of anxiety. I didn't know that. I would exercise and run around a lot. Okay, so to your point, Kim, kids spend most of their time inside. Kids, especially nowadays, it seems like there's more neurodivergence, or we're like calling it that. And there's always been that case. I would say as a young child, someone could call me that because I was hyper. But I myself, I'm fine. It's helped me have energy to accomplish big tasks and blah, blah, blah. I don't see it as something that has been a harm to me. But I do feel like the food we're eating now, as compared to maybe when I was younger, doing us no favors. So one other piece that I'd like to advocate for kind of really focusing in on the meat, the nutrient-dense meats, is that it takes the brain power away from the mother. It takes the stress of thinking, what am I going to feed my kid, especially my kid who struggles with whatever. Give him meat, okay? Like my son, he is so hyper, good kid, super intense, loves steak, he loves hamburger, and he loves carbs. He doesn't love vegetables. He'll eat blueberries. He'll have fruit. He doesn't like much else. And there is a clear difference in his mood and his behavior when we're focusing more on meats, giving that to him versus, of course, when he's hungry, if he grabs for a cracker or something else. So I just want to say it has helped me in meal planning and just knowing, even if my kid just eats a bunch of meat, I don't even need to worry about some of these other things. Even though I personally love vegetables, I love them. I feel like for me, it's great. I think one question some of our listeners will be about bowels and getting their fiber in and all that. So as I started talking, I wanted to share that story of my son. So those of you who struggle, just start giving your kids more meat, see how they do. But secondly, Kim, I want to ask you about this whole idea of constipation. If you eat a lot of meat, there's constipation. If you eliminate vegetables, how do we handle that?
Yeah. I would say it's a bit of a lie that we've been fed. That's what I've come to see, because story after story, mine included, that is not the case. If you're just eating meat and fat, it's the fat that more motivates the bowel. And so as I'm working with somebody, yes, there is a transition that happens if you're going to go into this way of eating. 2 weeks, pretty common that you may have, diarrhea or constipation as your gut bacteria is like, what's going on here? And, getting rid of a lot of that bacteria that you don't want to have. And then, yeah, the thing is too, how often you go. So you are eating the most nutrient dense foods and there isn't much waste. Doesn't that make sense? It just makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I would go several days and not go number two. And I don't feel bloated. It doesn't, there's no issues at all. I just, and this the same experiences with those that I help too in the same way. Yeah, hard to sit with. Maybe I get it. It was hard for me too. A lot of these things I came across just challenged a lot of beliefs that I held. And yeah, it takes time to sit with these things. And I think that's where the self-science piece comes in. Like we can, eating meat for, a month, meat and fat. Yeah, it's not going to harm you. You can see what it does to you. And then you can see what happens with that.
Recently, I was in Florida and I took a trip with my two sons and we did like a Universal Studios and it was super fun. But we stayed in a place called the Cabana Bay Resort. Maybe some of you out there have been there. And it's set up to be like you're in the 1950s, the whole thing. And it's super fun, super cool. And they have this huge like cafeteria basically. So when you need food, you just go and you sit and there's all these people, but they also have these giant TVs set up that have the commercials that were from the 40s and 50s. Super fascinating. So you'll be sitting there eating your terrible American food while you're watching the commercials that kind of started the trend of the terrible American food. And it's like, I saw the very first Rice Krispies commercial and the very first like canola oil. And there's just so many things you're like, oh my gosh, like they ate that way back then. And that's where that all started. And it made me realize like, wow, I mean, post World War II, again, there was just this like, you come out of the generation of scarcity in a sense. And then you move into a generation of like we're thriving again. And then you add in all these new technologies that brought processed foods to us. And then you promoted it like crazy and you promoted it as healthy. And all of a sudden we are here today with just more ultra processed foods after ultra processed foods with all of these commercials that tell us somehow, yeah, they're sugary, but there's something healthy here. We're going to share that with you, And so I just sat there and kind of like realized, wow, this is where it kind of all started, and we've been fed over and over these, like highly palatable foods that has changed the course of our health, truly. And so your philosophy, your book is to try to get back to like almost like that pre-generation before that, before all this technology came on board and we're at where we're at. Let's go back because we are seeing like a 50% increase in autoimmune diseases. I don't know what the increase in cancer is, but I mean, I think statistically 1 in 2 of us will have it by the time we live long enough. We are not a healthy generation. We are not moving the way that we should. We are not connecting in relationship the way that we should. So all of this is so important, and it's not easy either. It is incredibly hard, especially when you have a family and you're just trying to get by and just live, So give us practical kind of tips if you can, Kim, to kind of close as we kind of close down, like, what are your best practical tips for families out there, for individuals out there to really start making these steps towards a simpler way of living and a healthier way of living?
Yeah. Yeah. First, for me, what comes in first is just this, we just got to slow down a bit. We're at this, we're running the rat race. We're moving so fast and we hear this knowledge and that knowledge and it's so confusing. We just got to take a deep breath. Honestly, the answers are within us. The wisdom that, has been given as a human is still there. And yes, what you're speaking into, Teresa, and I just want to acknowledge you for what you're doing with your, patients. Thank you. Thank you so much for, introducing, being brave enough to introduce something like the carnivore diet. Yeah, that's to be acknowledged. But yeah, food is such a big piece. And I call it the 80% issue. Yeah, if we haven't looked at that first, as doctors, as mental health professionals, that should be almost the first question when somebody comes to us and is like, this, and this symptom, what are you putting into your mouth? Because we've lost such connection to our food. That's a whole nother hour we could talk, I'm sure. But I speak into that with the book too, like, knowing where our food comes from and how our ancestors ate. Like, we don't stop enough to even think about these things and what these foods, the impact that they're having on our health. And so as a family, like Jamie was saying, just simplify your table and prioritize your table. Like, that's another whole piece too. Let's sit around the table and enjoy a home cooked meal together that is heavy with meat and fat, that's nourishing your family. And then, in order to do that though, I think, like I said at the beginning, we need to like almost just slow down and make space for this. Because if we're running here, there, and we got to stop by fast food and we just, how are you going to introduce like this into your life? Because it does take a little bit of time to switch things up and focus differently. So that would be my encouragement to the woman listening, would be just to, take an hour and just breathe and just really think through where God is leading you.
And thinking too about, can I imagine, thinking about the source of meat, where you're getting the meat, it makes a big difference. So even maybe this Christmas season, or actually maybe when we're listening to this new year, new year, new you, we hear about that a lot. Think about like, well, is there a local farmer where I can purchase, a cow and have it stored in my freezer and pull it out? It takes less planning. You thought the night before, and I was thinking about kind of restoring my kids' health, and that's a whole story. I would prepare like meatballs, on a Sunday and then have them made, or we would cook extra meat to eat for the next 2 or 3 days, or ground a bunch of beef on Sunday and put them in the freezer in 1-pound bags. It's like prepping, but then it almost makes it easier. I sense that it actually made life easier. And it's like we go through phases, so let this be an encouragement, ladies to all, and men. There is some work to it, but I think I assumed it would be harder than it has become. It's actually much more simple, like you're saying, Kim. So Kim, with that, because of course our podcast is geared toward hormones. And as we eat, like you said, 80%, it's an 80% thing. What we eat in our bodies affect our hormones. What do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
Yeah, scripture came in for me when I was meditating on this question, and it's Psalm 139, verse 14. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, with great reverence and great respect. And I think we're all called to take on that attitude, towards our bodies, our whole bodies, minds, spirits, including our hormones that are our great symptoms. So that would be what I would encourage, is we can really like want to fight against, I guess, but more of an embrace of who we are and what our body is communicating to us. And that, I think, is where the path is revealed.
That's beautiful. Kim, tell us the name of the book. Tell us where people can get your book. And if you have any other resources or contacts, I know you do life coaching, health coaching. So give us your information so people, if they want to get those resources, have access to them.
Yes, very good. The book is Return to Simple, A Journey of Hope and Truth, and it is on Amazon. And as far as getting in touch with me, I am on Facebook. You can just look up my name, Kim VanDolah. Otherwise, my website is return2simple.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kim. This has been a delightful conversation. I think really a conversation that people will just sit with, hopefully. And like you said, kind of just sit with and ponder, take an hour, and just say, how can we start to move towards a simpler way of living? So I really appreciate it. It's been a joy, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel, so if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.